Dudes, I was so wrong about Metroid Dread. When I first saw screenshots of this, I thought the artwork looked bland. I thought that it looked like maybe it would just be kind of generic, like, Nintendo's just kicking out another Metroid game to cash in because they failed with the Metroid Prime 4, which I still have on pre-order from back in the day when Amazon let you pre-order games for $20 off. I'm holding on to that pre-order, hoping for Metroid Prime 4. But let's talk about Metroid Dread. And one of the reasons why I was out on this game was because a lot of the art looked very plastic. And that really bugged me. And I do have some disagreements with some of the art direction. But the game, dudes, the game is very, very good. And it was very annoying to me the first time I was fighting these Emmys. Now, Emmys are one-shot kill predator machines that hunt you down in specific zones. Okay, so there are these areas that you go into and you get this literal feeling of dread because if one of these things even so much as touches you, there's a 90% chance you're going to die unless you get your timing just absolutely perfect, which is damn near impossible to do unless you've been playing for 100 hours. So the game starts out somewhat slow, and this is very reminiscent of classic Metroid, Super Metroid games. And I will say this from the get-go. This is my favorite Metroid game. Maybe Prime beats this one, but that's just because I'm thinking that it is because of my nostalgia, but I'm pretty sure that this is my favorite Metroid game. Even though these Emmys are very annoying, if you can get past them and you can dodge them, the feeling of tension, that exhausting sort of huffing and puffing that you get when you're feeling like you're going to just die right away, once that subsides and you're doing a little bit more exploring, it feels really good. And then you get to this, it plays a lot with your emotions where you're feeling relaxed and you're just exploring around and you're puzzle solving to find things hidden in the environment. But adding these Emmy zones that create a lot of tension actually offsets that, and it creates this emotional roller coaster ride that kept me playing it pretty much nonstop. I was in the middle of playing something else. I put it down because I was like, man, I really can't think about anything other than Metroid right now. Everything else other than the Emmys feels like the original Metroid that you were used to from the old 2D Super Metroid days and Metroid Fusion. And I guess you might say Zero Mission as well. This story takes place immediately after all existing Metroid games, so it is the latest Metroid, and there are some interesting reveals in this story. I would say that this game is a masterclass in developing just enough story for this type of game, because you go in with an essential mission to this planet where the X has gotten loose and there is a nefarious looking villain who is plotting something, we don't know what, but we start to see that the X is taking over large areas of this planet. And by the end, I'm really trying to be spoiler free here. By the end, you start to see a bigger reveal about Samus, about this planet, and about the original Chozo. So it does dig in pretty deep to kind of becoming what feels like a culmination of many, many years of Metroid. In fact, it makes it seem like things that were set up 4 games ago, that's 15 years ago for those of you who are counting, that they still came to a conclusion, that they were designed with the purpose of this game eventually coming to mind to happen. So there is this feeling that you're playing a serious entry in the series, even though it's going back to its original roots of being a 2.5D side-scroller, which, by the way, amazing, so well done. The gameplay in this game makes me really wish they would just do a 2.5D update to Symphony of the Night or many of the other Castlevania games. You don't need to go fully 3D like they did with Lords of Shadow. You can do something that has similar gameplay to the original 2D platforming game, but it has the value of this depth where you can look into the distance. And I do wish that they had played that up a little bit, although where they did use that in this game is in the storytelling and the building of tension. So there are moments when you see a character in silhouette in the background or in the foreground, and then they jump into the gameplay scene, or there are previous subtleties in the storytelling of the visual storytelling of this game where you might have a creature that's in a encasement or it's being tortured in the background, and we don't know what it is even, and we might not even notice it until 10 or 20 minutes later when we're fighting it as a boss, for example. So there is a really good amount of storytelling and world changing. It's not just the same every time you come back to an environment. When the game makes you go back through a loop or search an area you've already been to, it might be totally different than the way that you played it before. So the game designers did a really good job of knowing how they were going to lead the player to where they wanted them to go, and how the game would be slightly different the next time they visit that location. And then on top of that, the most valuable thing when it comes to a Metroidvania is the feeling that the player is constantly getting stronger, that they're getting better, but at the same time, the challenge is increasing exponentially at the same rate. And that is the most difficult part of getting a Metroidvania correct from a game design standpoint, because you're constantly getting these upgrades to your beam weapon, and you don't have to switch them out like the old games. Like, for the most part, they just use every button on the controller face, and they do a good job of, let's just say, when you no longer need normal missiles, you get these frost missiles. And then, for instance, so you don't have to switch between normal missiles and frost missiles. Just every missile is going to be the most powerful one that you can get. But as soon as you get that, they introduce new enemies that are going to be a new challenge in the location that you're in, or they will create a new challenge whereby you have to use that same weapon in a new way to traverse the puzzle or traverse the landscape to get to the next area. And there are a lot of areas, and I would say where with a Metroidvania, where players might get a little frustrated and wonder, did I get myself trapped here? Did I break the game? And no, you never really do. But there's always that thing where you're wondering if maybe you did, because it feels like you're going off the rails. And I would consider that a really good game design. If you've got the player feeling that way, I consider that good game design. The tempo, the speed that you're moving in this game is exponentially growing. So by the time you get to the final boss, you are zipping across the screen at like speeds that require 60 frames per second, okay? Because you are cruising, and it gets so fast. The twitch action responses that they expect you to perform are so minute. They're the windows are so short that you really have to be developing your skills throughout the game. And it is definitely, it had that Dark Souls feeling. I never played a game that represented so well that Dark Souls level of challenge and difficulty as Metroid Dread. The bosses are truly a test of the skills that they have been teaching you up to that point. And the way that they make it so you don't get so frustrated that you quit is that the penalties are not always that severe. So for example, when you're fighting a boss, you're never going to beat a boss on your first run. That's just, it's not designed to be played that way. It's designed so that you will fight a boss and you will die, and then you will learn what their pattern is. You will learn how they're moving, and then you before you even realize it, you'll be adapting to how they're moving, and you'll see their projections, because they'll do an animation that shows, oh, they're about to do that swinging move. That's when you have to do the jump spin or whatever it is in that particular moment. And so as you dig deeper into a boss, so you may play them 5 times or 6 times or 10 times. By the 10th time, you've gotten to their phase 2 or phase 3 of their attack phase, or of their attack pattern, and you will have mastered all the previous stages by that point. So it does feel like you're learning how they telegraph their moves. You're learning how to react when they do certain animations. And the penalty is never so severe as the old Metroid games. In the old Metroid games, if you died at a boss fight, you had to go back to the safe spot. Not true with Metroid Dread. They made this, I think it was a very smart move to change that system. So if you're just exploring the world and you die, yeah, you go back to your last save point. But if you're in a boss fight or an Emmy zone, and this was very key, by the way, because those Emmys can kill you in one hit, they absolutely had to change this in the game design. So it just starts you back at the door where you entered that ME zone. And if it's a boss fight, it starts you at the door where you entered that boss fight zone. So when you die during that boss fight, you don't have to go back all the way through everything up to that boss. And this was how game designers used to make things difficult back in the 90s. But now they realize, nah, it's hard enough as it is. Like, let's just make really good game design and telegraph our enemies' movements so that the challenge is in the skill, not in the frustration of making a small mistake and then having to pay this hefty penalty. The penalties with Metroid Dread are very seldom severe, and I found that to be a welcome change to their formula and their system. This really does take everything that made Super Metroid and all those old 2D Metroids amazing, and it one-ups them, and it refines them for the modern era. I was also pleased to see that Samus's outfit upgrades as you progress through the game. As I said, I was really annoyed by a lot of the artwork. I thought it felt plasticky. I thought it felt a little bit like shortcutted, I guess you'd say, especially coming from the team that did Lords of Shadow. This is certainly a different art team, and possibly it could be Nintendo, because Nintendo themselves have a kind of a very strict policy when it comes to how characters look. And sometimes they want their characters to look like toys or action figures. And I think that that's a poor decision on their part. And I do kind of wish that we had a little bit more detailed matte surfaces on Samus's outfit. Like the blue just looks like really shiny plastic. The white looks like plastic plating. This could have looked so much better. And I hate to be so critical, because I know that possibly, you know, there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to the art on a main character for a Nintendo franchise. And I certainly don't want to be too critical on any particular artist or art director. I think the art director on this game is an incredible, insanely good artist, and I respect him tremendously and his design sense and his artwork as well. But the final character models sometimes just look very simplistic and plain, and I would love to see them. Basically, the whole time as a video game artist, I kept feeling like I want to redesign these characters, but I also know it would never get past Nintendo's ever watchful, all-seeing eye. Like, Donkey Kong's nose is always this percentage of his face, and there is never a difference in color on his tie, for example, so why would it be different with Samus? This is where I feel like this game is going to leave the most impact. I think that we're going to see a lot more indies taking a page out of Metroid Dread's playbook here and upgrading their 2D platformers into 2.5D platformers, because this is the series that's always shown us the way, so to speak, and what the next evolution will be. I do see a lot of room for this to grow. I would love to go back and just see remakes of the old Metroid games done in a similar fashion, but also the Castlevania series too, because, oh man, it shows you the potential for classic 2.5D platformers. And I know you could point to a lot of other ones and say, oh no, this other one does it really well too, such as Ori. Yeah, I think Ori does it really well too, but there was something about the combat with Ori and the difficulty that I could never get into it. But with this, even though it's very challenging, I think it's something about the world itself that was very compelling and interesting to me, especially when you get to the levels where you're dealing with a lot more natural elements, such as like these fish tanks. It feels like you're in a fish tank because of the cutaway of the 2.5D that they've done, where you're looking into this little ant farm style of environment. It's just absolutely beautiful. I would not, however, recommend this to a new Metroid player, or if you're not really good at video games. This game is freaking hard. It's like a Dark Souls level of difficulty, and there is no easy setting, and I don't think that there should be. However, if you are persistent and you are an intermediate gamer, you can beat this game. But I almost quit right at the end, and I'm glad that I didn't. I did actually finish it. It was very difficult, very challenging. I just could not stop. I had to keep coming back because of that feeling of just when it's really challenging and then you beat it, it feels damn good, which is also why I'm making this video. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Metroid Dread. I do recommend it for people who like a really challenging game. This is not for your Animal Crossing fan base. at all. This is for people who like a good challenge and like to overcome that challenge in a game. You know, something, if you're a Dark Souls player, then this is something that's perfect for you. But otherwise, I would say it's worth checking it out if you can get it on a deal, if you think you're not going to beat it, but because it's just such a fascinating game to come along in this day and age, especially from Nintendo. They like to innovate everything, and this game doesn't necessarily innovate, but it does kind of stack upon everything that's been done with the Metroid series before. And it does make me wonder, how is the Metroid Prime 4 team going to look at this? I've got a couple of friends that work on that team, and I'll have to ask them, because if I were working on that project, I'd really be wondering why we're not just doing it in 2.5D like this as well. Personally, I would just love to see the series continue in this exact direction. I have this feeling that Metroid Prime 4 is probably going to take a bit of a hit to their morale after this one, unless if they're coming to the table with something so unique and fresh. But that game's been canceled several times. It's 3 years behind what its original ship date was supposed to be, and I'd be really surprised if Nintendo even allows it to happen. Maybe the best move that Nintendo could do with the Metroid series from now on is, one, release that updated remaster of Metroid Prime 1 through 3, and then move forward with Metroid Dread 2. Don't call it Metroid Dread 2, please, but move forward with this type of game. I think that would be the smartest move that Nintendo could make to satisfy their fans. Also, get this team making a Castlevania Symphony of the Night remake in 3D. All right, dudes, that's it for me on this one. Thank you so much for stopping by for these game room videos. I'm just having fun playing games and talking about them. It's my jam. I enjoy it. So I'd love to hear what games you think that I should be playing next. Right now I'm playing Deadly Premonition. Origins. What a weird one. Anyway, I'm going to have some thoughts on that one, hopefully coming up soon, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.